I'll put that, but, I do. Us the prompt on the screen in front of you. That's what we're just gonna, when we do little introductions, that's what we're gonna ask you to say.
Would you like me to do a roll call?
I would, thank you so
Okay.
much, Vanessa.
All right, Daniel Beerwalt. Diane Bailey. Here. Stephen Booker.
Brother.
Michael Clausen. Kathleen Goforth.
Present.
Melee Hemuli.
Present.
Aurelio Huizar. Gail Lee. Gail, will you accept my invitation to join as a panelist, please? And then you should be able to announce yourself. Great. Gail Lee.
She's still muted.
Oh, yeah, she's muted.
Muted. Okay, present.
Thank you. Margaret Lee.
I heard a chirp.
I heard
I think she said yes.
Cheryl Schaff.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, yeah, present.
Desiree Thayer. Present. Robert Whitehair.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Wait, you forgot me. I'm here.
Yeah, Jason.
I did. I'm sorry. Jason Mendelson.
Nice chair is here. Okay, thank you.
See, Jen has her hand raised.
Oh,
Yeah.
hi. Hey, Jen.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I know that we have a few members joining us remotely due to illness, and I just want to, for the purpose of the record, document that they are able to do so using the just cause provisions from Government Code 54953 F2A1. Generally, the requirement for a contagious illness requires the body to take a vote for permitting the members to join remotely. So if we could just do so very quickly, then we could move on to the regular agenda.
I so move that we approve that they join us remotely under those conditions.
Do we have a second?
Melee
Yeah,
seconds.
All right. Do we need to list who they are for some reason or not?
I think that Vanessa does have that as a record, but we can go ahead and do so, Chair, if you would just orally say who is joining remotely.
I can't say it, but Vanessa can.
Okay, so that'll be Kathleen Goforth, Margaret Lee, and Gail Lee.
Thank
Great.
you.
And then if Michael comes,
So
is Michael
Daniel,
coming?
they should be online. So should
Okay.
Daniel. He was
All
on
right,
before.
we may be receiving,
And Vanessa, can you hit Daniel up? Because he was in our other meeting.
Okay, I'll email him.
Okay, all right.
okay,
Thank you.
so do we need to now vote on that or?
Yes,
Yes.
there was a
Yes.
motion pending. I didn't hear a second, but I might
We
have.
did. Melee seconded.
Melee did.
All right, excellent. Yes, and we can go ahead and do a roll call vote for all future votes in this vote because we have folks online.
Okay. Daniel Beerwalt. Diane Bailey. Yes. Stephen Booker. Michael Clausen. Kathleen Goforth.
Aye.
Melee Hemuli.
Yes.
Aurelio Huizar.
Yes.
Gail Lee.
I,
Margaret Lee.
yes.
Jason Mendelson.
Yes.
Cheryl Schaff.
Yes.
Desiree Thayer. Yes. Robert Whitehair. Okay, the motion passes.
Thank you. All right. So I do want to ask if any member of the public would like to make a public comment on matters that are not listed on the agenda.
I do not see any raised hands on Zoom.
Okay.
Robert, did you want to wait?
Okay, yes, please, Robert, speak.
On Tuesday, January 2nd, the Federal Appeals Court declined to rehear the Berkeley case on gas bans. I would like to have it be brought back on the next agenda for this group. And have a discussion and maybe a staff report at that point.
Okay. Thank you. That's a good idea. And we can talk more about that if you want to in the, near the end of the meeting at the upcoming agenda items, if you want to add anything. But
Yeah,
duly noted.
yeah, upcoming agenda item, I'll do that.
Okay, great. All right, so then our next action then will be to set the agenda and approve the consent agenda items. Any discussion from the committee members? So does someone want to move that we accept the agenda and the consent agenda items?
Move to set the agenda and approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Desiree.
Second.
Thank you, Melu.
Diane Bailey,
Yes.
Stephen Booker,
Aye.
Michael Clausen, Kathleen Goforth,
Aye.
Melee Himuli,
Yes.
Aurelio Huizar, Gail Lee,
Yes.
Margaret Lee,
Yes.
Jason Mendelson, Daryl Shaw,
Yes.
Desiree Thayer,
Yes.
Robert Whitehair.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you. All right. So our next agenda item is my report. I'm going to be very short because we have a nice learning opportunity tonight. So I wanted to make sure we have plenty of time. Shreyas is no longer on the CAC. I haven't had a chance to talk with him, and I will. I've done exit interviews with people as they are leaving, but we're pretty sure that he basically couldn't make the meetings, and he's the head of a startup, and so we're pretty sure that just his commitments with the startup just sort of ate up his time in life. But we'll be hearing more. So he wasn't able to come to 3 meetings, so he is by regulation then no longer a member. So, and we're in discussions about trying to not wait all the way till the regular recruitment period, and maybe go back to the list of people who wanted to be on the CAC, the last recruitment round, to see if we can just go back to that pool and pull some people from there, because I want to get some more people populating the group, placing them, and being on working groups as soon as we can. But we'll learn more later as Kirsten finds out what we can do in that. It would be a departure from the norm, which was just recruiting each spring. So I want to thank you all for completing the members survey and for sharing candidly. We really appreciate that. It matters what you are thinking about and what you want to do. And we really appreciate you taking the time to do that. If you think of things that were in your mind when you answered the survey, I hope you'll bring those up in this meeting or send me an email or a text or something, because we really care about what you have to say. And the sooner we can know what you're thinking and what changes you'd like to make or how you'd like to see this group functioning, the better. This team brings ideas and opinions of the public to PCE. So it's really important for each of us to share what we know and what we want to know. So that is my report. Let's see, are there any comments on my report? Public comments? Right, we will move forward then. So tonight, we're going to do our introductions quickly and efficiently. The question is up there, the prompt. In 1 or 2 words, please share something you want more of in 2024. Robert, will you start us out tonight?
I already thought something wrong, less of it, that's less fossil fuels. I ruined it for you, sorry.
All right, that's okay. So you want more electric energy.
More electricity. There you
There you go. All right, Diane Bailey.
We'd love to see more local accountability on climate action plans.
Mhm.
We have a lot of great action plans.
Yeah.
Actually,
Great idea. Melanie, how about you?
I'm with Robert, electric energy, more of it.
Aurelio?
More discount for people who need it.
Discount? Yeah, save the money. Okay. Vanessa, how about you?
I am looking forward to more fun community outreach and just more creativity.
Great. That sounds good. Kirsten?
Oh, I like the creativity. Yeah, like more creativity in our outreach and marketing.
Well, I actually took it personally and I'm going to try to build more serenity into my life in 2024. More serenity.
All right, I want ice cream right now. I don't know if that counts. Otherwise, I'll start with that, and then I think, I don't want more dairy, so I gotta figure that out too. So I got some of that at your place, of non-dairy ice cream, so at your festival. I personally want to have some more discussions with PG&E. And I'll leave it at that because this is a public meeting.
And it's rated G.
That's right.
Okay. Desiree, how about you?
I was also thinking more on the personal side, so like more time outdoors.
Yes.
More time what?
Outdoors.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Okay. Stephen Booker.
World peace.
Oh.
That's.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say peace, but then I thought it was gonna sound too much like I was a Miss America contestant, so.
Well, Stephen's doing that.
But no, we desperately need
I'll
that.
take Miss San Francisco.
Jeremy, how about you?
Yeah, that more compassion.
Kathleen, do you want to tell us what you'd like more of in 1 or 2 words?
I'm with Stephen. First things that came to my mind were peace and real progress on climate mitigation.
Okay. Oh, yeah, we have Margaret. Margaret, what do you want more of this coming year?
Personally, time and less me back home.
Okay.
it again?
We couldn't quite get that.
Oh, let me get off my.
You're cutting out, Margaret.
Okay, let me try this. Can you hear me better?
Yes, better.
I can't hear.
Should we send it in the chat?
Yeah, maybe you should send it in the chat. All right, we'll move on.
Okay, I'll
to-
put
Oh,
it in
okay.
the chat.
Nobody gets it.
More connection.
All right. Margaret, we're gonna move on to Gail. Please send your, what you'd like more of in the chat and we can look at that. Gail, how about you?
I'd like to see a faster transition to fossil-free everything.
Wonderful. And Daniel didn't join us yet, right?
Ask Jennifer.
Not you.
Oh, Jennifer, we haven't asked you. I think you're muted.
Yeah, I get to participate. That's exciting.
Why not?
I think I'm gonna go with the speedy completion of our strategic goals, which encompass a lot of what you all are saying.
Great.
Terrific. Okay, did we get everyone now? Except Margaret? We couldn't hear. All right, can you read what she said?
I haven't seen a response coming
Okay,
yet.
all right.
She has 2 hours to respond.
All right, thank you, everybody. It's.
Can you hear her? I
There you go.
Sorry, there we go. Thank you. Wonderful. I'm
Initially,
sorry that
I
was-
said screaming for my kids.
Oh.
All right, thanks for working so hard.
And more of it.
All right. Okay. Let's see. We are now going to move to the item concerning the staff committee on budget surplus, and Kirsten's going to give us sort of how that landed.
Yeah, so this will be a very short report. The board approved the same proposal that was shared with you at your last meeting, exactly the same way that it was presented to you. You've seen these numbers before, and that is what the board approved.
Anyone have any questions about that? Stephen has a question, yes.
What are the qualifications for Terra Farah customers and
Oh,
where do you find that?
What are the qualifications?
more than $23,470 for qualified for care program. And for FERA, it's gonna be like a 20,000 per year. Another way to qualify is be enrolling HIT program. Be enrolled launch, see the children have launches in the school. If they are enrolling medical, if they have CalFresh. Which other one? 6, I don't remember the last two. It's basically that one.
Really, what was that amount you said?
23,476
A year.
a year.
What family size is that?
It's depend because could be one or two person, 3 or 4 person, because right now it's very difficult because it's, for example, 2 families with parents and 4 children, they don't make only $20,000, $27,000. They account for like a four person. So even though they.
And where can we find that?
Huh?
Where can we find that?
PG&E,
PG&E website?
PG&E website.
I asked a question and I wanted Kirsten to actually share. I just wondered if we had heard anything from the customers about the rebates that have occurred. I guess they were supposed to happen in December and January. So I just wondered if there was any feedback.
Yeah, we didn't do a lot of advertising of the Care rates in San Mateo County. We did do it in Los Banos because nearly half of our residential customers there are Care customers. It's only about 20% San Mateo County, but it's like 50% Los Banos. So, and we're like, it's newer territory. There's frankly more mistrust as there's a higher opt-out rate. So we really want to get the good news out. So we ran a newspaper ad, we ran radio ads in English and Spanish. We did social media video, we did something else, which I'm not remembering right now. But like we did a fair amount of getting the word out. And I haven't seen a lot of feedback yet, but initial feedback we've heard from community members is like, or when community leaders like, oh, wow, that's wonderful. That's going to help so many people. I can't wait to get the word out about that. And then some people are like, wait, is that for real? So I've heard of some people calling into our call center asking, wait, is this for real? What's the catch? So that's, but we're hoping that helps, raise trust in Pennsylvania Clean Energy, especially in that part of our service territory where so many people are going to benefit. I think it was, yeah, it's a huge number in Los Banos in terms of the total rebate spent there. Okay, great.
Any other questions for, oh yeah, here.
So just to clarify, the rebate comes in as a one-shot $300 of credit to their bill, or is it at like increments?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm raising the wrong word. It's not rebate, it's a bill.
Right.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. So yeah, it comes in as a one-time bill credit, either in the December or January bill.
Okay.
Okay, not both, just one.
One time. Yeah.
I believe it does, if your bill is less than the credit amount, it will carry forward to the next bill to keep offsetting your forward billing until it's exhausted.
Nice.
But it applies to the total bill, so your gas, your electric distribution and generation. So it may go faster than you might think when you get in the heating and everything else.
Questions for Kirsten? All right, are there any public comments?
I don't see any raised hand. And to make a public comment on Zoom, please raise your hand.
Oh, yeah.
So this got passed pretty quickly by the board. There wasn't a whole lot of discussion. It was good and passed it.
Okay, great. So thank you, Kirsten. We'll move now on to a presentation by Jeremy. He's going to give us background on the regulation of California's electricity sector. And he has some slides which were sent to us previously, I think just maybe yesterday. So if you haven't had a chance to look at them, take a look, and then he's allowed lots of time for Q&A. Let's welcome Jeremy. Thank you.
Yeah, 60 minutes was blocked off for this. My deck is nowhere near 60 minutes, so. Hoping we have room for conversation. We have some good Q&A. So yeah, this deck is pretty introductory. It's very similar to the kind of orientation deck for the board on regulatory affairs. So and that's a good starting point. And then from there, I'm happy to field questions and explore policy issues with the collective here. So yeah, I'm Jeremy Wayne. I'm the Senior Director of Regulatory Policy for Peninsula Clean Energy. And we can get into the deck. So as I said, there are a few things, but it's pretty rudimentary introduction, the role within PCE, the team, the approach that we take to regulatory policy and advocacy. A brief overview of what the different state regulatory agencies are, what their domains are, where they focus. And then some of the key issues that we cover, not at all an exhaustive list, but a sampling. And this business, unfortunately, is all about the acronyms. So some of the key acronyms that come along with policy. And then a little deeper dive into one particularly important acronym, which is the Power Charge and Difference Adjustment. And then just some general remarks about challenges and opportunities that we see facing the industry and kind of coming to a forefront in policy conversations here in California.
Sorry, would you mind just speaking up a little bit? I want
Sure.
to make sure everyone out there can hear. I'm having a little trouble hearing. There's like some white noise or something.
I'll try to project over the traffic. We can
Thank
move
you.
on to the next slide.
We also do have a microphone if that would be helpful.
Can do
So
that.
I can, there's a handheld over there that Alex Cassius helped us set that up.
He's coming over. I will project until he's got it ready.
Jeremy,
Thank
do you
you.
want us to ask questions as you're presenting, or do you want us to wait till the end?
Feel free to ask questions as they come up. Yeah.
Well, I'll just throw one out that I'm hoping you will cover. When I looked at the slides, I was really interested in who appoints the members to these various bodies. And how do they get appointed? I mean, I just want to understand where these people making these really amazing decisions are coming from.
It's a good question.
Okay, so if you could talk about the appointments, how they get
Sure.
into those roles. And the other thing was, it looks like, from my first glance, that some of the organizations really overlap in what they're supposed to do. And I don't
Somewhat.
understand how that's
Yeah.
possible. So, anyway, so if you could cover those, that's.
Sure. Yeah, when we get to the slides with the 4 agencies and their breakdown, I'll
Okay.
focus on that.
Thanks.
aspect. Yeah. You can hear my voice now, so this must be working.
Oh, that's much better. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next. So at a glance, this is our team. We've been growing slowly but steadily, not quite as fast as some of the other departments, but we did just add on a new member, Jenna, in September of last year. And Shoshana joined us in September of the year before. So we are still small but mighty, and we cover a wide range of topics in both the policy advocacy side and then also the regulatory compliance side, which is not a trivial task, especially as we get more deeply involved in programmatic offerings. And as the state regulations grow and grow, there's just many more compliance obligations that we face. But it's a great team that we have. Next slide. And kind of the way I envision this department and this role is a bit like we work a lot with consultancies and law firms, so it kind of quickly pops into my mind that we're kind of a firm in our own right that's really here to support all the other departments of the organization. All the other departments are kind of our clients, and our job is just to help them do their jobs better and help provide them with whatever support we can. And doing so while interfacing with the state and the state's regulatory bodies that have their rules and regulations that we need to comply with as an electrical service provider in California. But depending on the issue area, can touch on many of these different departments, some one at a time, some multiples at a time, just depending upon the nature of the matter that we have to cover. But a lot of our work to date on the prior slide, the couple of the members there, Doug and Matthew, have been with the team longer. Doug's work focuses very heavily on the policy work that helps to support our procurement efforts. So things like our integrated resources planning effort, which is something we have to do we have to produce a plan every 2 years. The state has a very involved process around that, but it's our many year forward look at how we are going to procure the resources we need to serve our customers and to make sure they're clean and green and reliable, and other things like resource adequacy, which you may have heard a bit about because it's been a very difficult market these days, a very expensive market for compliance. And Matthew on the team, he has focused much more heavily on policy that supports our programmatic efforts. So be it electric cars or building electrification, and other programs like our disadvantaged community green tariff and our community solar green tariff. Some of the examples of the cases that he's helped support us on, but so in that example is interfacing very closely with programs. Sometimes there are implications for how we bill our customers, how billing is structured and such. So we'll interface with Leslie and her team in that area. Often there's marketing that goes along with it. There's implications across the organization. So again, we try to help everyone do what they need to do and help this organization succeed overall.
So are most of the people on your team from utilities? Did they come from utilities?
We have a diverse crowd. So I've been in the CCA business. My background is my start in the electric utility sector came through working for the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission as an intern, and then working for Marin Clean Energy for a while. So I've really been in the CCA space for my professional career in energy. People kind of come from a range of backgrounds. Doug has had a number of different hats, a number of different positions. He's a PhD biologist. He's also has his JD and has formerly served as an attorney and is now counsel on our staff. So he's done a little bit of everything under the sun, it seems. And Matthew on my team, he actually came to us by way of Vermont. He worked for public utility in Vermont, Stowe Electric, and had a lot of interesting experience from the municipal side where they're not only buying and selling power, but maintaining the infrastructure and having to deal with outages and new service drops and so forth. So he has that background. Shoshana Clara, she actually, she's Hungarian, and she and her husband moved here some years ago, but in her time in Hungary, she was an attorney working for the Hungarian equivalent of the Public Utilities Commission and worked on a number of market structural oversight and reform items in her time there. So it's a pretty interesting background. And our latest addition, Jenna Sharp, she came to us by way of Calpine, and Calpine does a lot of our billing support services, and she was more involved with some of their work in other states, other areas around the country, trying to actually help support movements like other CCA formations in other states. Yeah. Next slide. Sorry. Oh. Did we skip one there? Okay, I guess so. So it's kind of the general philosophies around how we engage in policy advocacy as we try to accomplish all of these, demonstrating leadership, fostering collaboration, supporting growth and access to community energy, advocating for clean, reliable, and affordable electricity, cultivating key relationships. Where PCE is a decently sized electric utility, but in the greater scheme of California, we're still pretty small fish in the sea. So certainly focusing on coalition building and finding common allies is a key part of our advocacy structure. Really establishing and maintaining a level of respect and trust for PCE. We really try to be a real, as I said, thought leader, but a respected voice and a reasonable voice. Often the commission in their cases will really kind of find the point of compromise or try to find the point of compromise. And so everyone has a different approach. Some people like to pushed to one real extreme so that the compromise is at least further over in their direction than they wanted, than it might have been otherwise. We try to take a pretty measured, rational, middle of the road perspective, and I think that does help quite a bit in terms of the receptions we get with the regulators and their staff and their willingness to meet with us and hear our perspectives on matters when something is timely and urgent. A key area that we're focusing on, we've been focused on, and we're continuing to focus towards is really finding new funding sources. So much of our operations is through the revenues we collect through our electricity service, but there's a limit to how much of that there is, and we have very lofty goals, and especially in terms of some of our programmatic work, getting all that clean technology out there into our communities. And so if there are opportunities to leverage federal funding, state funding, other sorts of means, low-cost finance or so forth, we're exploring all those avenues as well to help scale up what this organization's trying to do more quickly. And then, as I mentioned, compliance is no small task. When Shoshana joined us, she was given the fun task of trying to summarize and consolidate all of the different compliance obligations that we have as an organization, because they've been managed across multiple departments over years. And she very quickly came up with a robust list, and it was about 175 different obligations throughout a single calendar year that we have to meet. So there's a lot in the world of compliance that needs to go on. Some of them are, one report that is repeated throughout the year, maybe every month. So it's not all that difficult to end up with 12 copies of it, but some of them are very large. Like the integrated resource plan that I mentioned before is a very, very large filing that we have to file before the commission each year. And then enabling broader CCA success. It's not just about PCE succeeding or doing well, or our community is doing well. It's about the state as a whole. Climate change is a global predicament. And so it's about making sure that the successes that we develop here can extend out elsewhere, and others can learn from our what we've learned and adapt it to serve their communities as well. So those are kind of the broad philosophies we operate under. Next slide. And so here on this slide and the next slide are the 4 main regulatory bodies at the state level that we interface with. The one that gets most space here is the California Public Utilities Commission, and this is really the main agency that we interface with. I would say it varies year to year, but at least 70% of our bandwidth, I'd say, is really focused on Public Utilities Commission related matters. And the main reason for that is that they directly regulate the investor-owned utilities like PG&E. And so while they don't directly or fully regulate what we do, there are certain provisions in state law where the commission does have oversight. So things like the resource adequacy program, we are obligated under state law to procure electric capacity to meet the resource adequacy program. If we don't comply, we answer to the Public Utilities Commission. So there are some examples like that. But even if there's an area where we are not directly under the regulatory thumb of the Public Utilities Commission, PG&E may ask to do something that has repercussions for our offerings or our customers, our communities. And so we need to be very vigilant, not just about the matters that are squarely focused on CCA, but anything and everything that PG&E might be pursuing under the regulatory oversight of the Public Utilities Commission. The Public Utilities Commission is for California, an old establishment, an old institution. It was established through the state's constitution, and it regulates a very wide range of industries. We think about it primarily in terms of electricity and the utilities that we work with, but they regulate gas, water, telecom, rail, passenger transport.
Telecom would be phone companies?
Phone companies, most of it's been
Internet
deregulated at this point, so they don't have a lot of oversight. I don't believe internet service is regulated. I think that might be a federal level only, and they apparently, I don't know if they still do, but back in the day, they did regulate hot air balloons as well. So they do a little bit of everything. And they've started very heavily focused on rail. Because back in that day, railways and the railway barons that were out there were a pretty big deal. And that's part of why the Public Utilities Commission is founded in San Francisco, based in San Francisco, where the vast majority of all the other state government is in Sacramento. Thought was having it a little farther from Sacramento might keep it a little further from the, I don't know, political influence that was so heavily focused on Sacramento. So that is in kind of in a historic nutshell why the Public Utilities Commission is based in San Francisco. And as I said, the vast majority of our work interfaces with the Public Utilities Commission because of their direct role in regulating the utilities. And I will say it's slow, but there, with the passage of new laws and time, there is a kind of an ever creeping growth of, or at least attempted growth by the CPUC to exert more jurisdictional oversight onto what the CCAs are doing in the state as well. So that's something that we are very mindful of and very defensive towards. It's something that CCAs are authorized by state law, spelled out in statute. Our board has direct oversight over our rate setting and our procurement, our core operations. But there are always these asterisks in statute that exempt certain areas where the renewable portfolio standard, resource adequacy, integrated resource planning, all these different fun acronyms, where the commission has some role in saying whether we are doing, how we should be doing what we're doing, whether we're doing it well or doing it the way that the state thinks we should be doing it. And to your question about appointees, governance, so I'm most familiar with the governance structure of the CPUC, and they have the 5 commissioners that are all appointed by the governor, confirmed by the state legislature. And they serve, I'm trying to remember, it's either 6 or 8 year terms. I should know this. They serve rather long terms. Some in more recent years, some have ended their terms early, so there's been a little more turnover. But usually 2 or 3 at a time are appointed by the current governor. So there's always some history, some institutional knowledge from the prior administration carrying forward. And each commissioner has really, each one of them has a unique background. They're not all necessarily coming from, say, leadership positions at the electric utilities or even the electricity sector at all. Some of them come from other aspects of state government, other sectors that are maybe not even directly regulated by the Public Utilities Commission, but they've been selected for their experience and their knowledge elsewhere. But it's very much a political process of how the commissioners at the helm of the commission are appointed. They do rely heavily on the expertise of their staff, and every commissioner's office has roughly 5-6 advisors that are there as key staff to support them. And generally those advisors are people that have worked at the Public Utilities Commission for quite some time. So that's where a lot of the institutional knowledge really sits, or their chiefs of staff and their key advisors. And then within the Public Utilities Commission, there are numerous different divisions with many, many staff members underneath that. So it's a pretty large bureaucracy overall.
So they're all paid, and
They
that's
are.
what they do. They don't do something else too, right?
They are paid positions, though I'll admit they are not paid anywhere as well as they probably should be for the amount of heat they sometimes get for their work they're doing. But they're, state employees paid for the position. They're not kind of moonlighting as a CPUC commissioner while doing a day job somewhere else. Yeah. The ISO. So
Can I ask a question about PUC?
Sure.
When a organization or a company wants to change the rules or regulations or raise a fee or tariff or a rate, that company or organization writes that proposal, right, and submits it to the PUC. PUC doesn't write them.
No.
It's written by PG&E, it's written by whoever.
For So for a regulated utility who's under the commission's oversight, if they say if PG&E wants to raise their rates, they need to do that through a formal process, a formal filing submitted to the commission. And so they have a whole rules of practice and procedure approach to it, but their regulatory proceedings are, they can either be started by the commission on their own, or they can be a petition from an outside party to ask the commission to convene a proceeding. So for rates, utility rate adjustments, it's the utility submitting an application to the commission seeking approval of proposed revenue requirement, proposed revenue adjustment. And there are, for the three big utilities, there's standing proceedings that happen on a routine cadence to adjust their rates on a going forward basis. So there's the big rate adjustment that you're probably hearing a lot about right now, that's in a lot of the headlines right now, the 20-something% swing up in rates. That's coming out of what is called a general rate case. And the general rate cases are typically a 3 to 4 year process, where one of the three utilities are all on a different schedule, but one of them, so PG&E submits their application. They come out with this multi-billion-dollar revenue request to support their full lines of their business operations. And those filings, the testimony supporting those filings is thousands and thousands of pages, where they go into rather granular detail about, here's why we need this much money for this department. This is how many computers we need to pay for in this next year. This is how much overhead we have to pay for with our corporate offices, and here's how much inflation we're expecting in the next year that's going to impact our operations, and all sorts of different things.
That is reviewed by staff.
That's
I'm assuming that those are written in accordance with some rules and procedures about what constitutes what they can charge for.
Yeah, so
Well, my question, who writes those regulations?
So the regulations are spelled out in, they're spelled out in the commission in their prior work and the final precedent. Some of it's spelled out in state statute as well. But the regulatory, this example for the general rate case is something that's just been done and done and done since the early days of the utilities being around. So it's, a lot of it is kind of driven by the fact that this is how we did it before, and this is how we did it a decade before and 2 decades before, and it's just kind of become a convention. So it's a little hard to say exactly how much of it's strictly spelled out in law that this must be in this way. But as far as the commission's regulations, the regulatory process, that's very much strictly spelled out, like what are the proper order and process for them to convene and conduct a proceeding, establish an adequate record to then support a decision that then allows them to allows the commission to authorize PG&E to collect a certain amount of money in their rates. There's very much a list that they have to go through each time. And so commission staff is reviewing the request, yes, but then they also do very heavily depend upon intervening parties, which can be anyone who's interested. They have to request to become a formal party within the proceeding, but for example, community choice aggregations like Peninsula are often interveners. In general rate cases, there are the Public Advisor's Office, which is a ratepayer protection group within the Public Utilities Commission, that is, their role is really there to protect the ratepayers. There are other groups like TURN, the Utility Reform Network, that are very active in general rate cases, and they too are there to really try to put some pressure in the other direction from where the utility is leaning in terms of trying to authorize such vast amounts of spending. I have to pull up the numbers again, but the staggering increases in the revenues and in the rates that were just authorized were actually stepped down quite a bit from the initial asks that the utility was putting forward. And that a lot of that credit goes to some of these organizations, as mentioned, that intervene very deeply. And these cases, they take place every 3-4 years. This current GRC that was approved actually took an extra year to just get resolved. So these are multi-year endeavors with interveners engaging, filing testimony, having hearings to cross-examine the witnesses provided by the utilities and really get into the details. And a lot of the general rate cases are actually determined through settlement processes of the commission as well, where there's negotiations between the utility and all the other intervening parties, and they come to some point of compromise and then advance that compromise to the commission for approval. So there's a lot of that is just settlement driven. That's kind of
I ask you all these questions because these are the
Yeah.
questions I get asked by my friends and neighbors. So thank you. I appreciate you going into that great detail.
Can I make a quick comment that I think you'll hopefully appreciate? But one of the main things historically that we would hear from Jeremy and his team and his predecessor's team was the fight over like the PCA, because PG&E will come in and go, we need $50 trillion for our loss of customers. And I'm exaggerating all of this, but the big part of what the CCAs have done, and specifically PC has done, Jeremy's team has done, is explain why maybe that's not quite accurate. Because that delta, the PCA is the money that on everybody's bill, which you'll explain I'm sure in a few minutes, is what goes back to PG&E out of what PC is collecting to make up for the legacy contracts they had to make, amongst other things, but it's to cover their overhead for their pre-existing deals. And so that's one of the things I think you're speaking of specifically, and that's we've been, PC and Jeremy's team is very successful, or at least tried to be, and often has been very successful at mitigating that issue. But that's what you guys have to do with the PUC, right? To get that to work, so.
The PCIA we'll get into in a little further detail, but those rates and PG&E's generation rates, which are the primary rates that we focus on, because that's what we have to compete with and adjust our rates around. Those are set on an annual basis. So it's now May through December is the time horizon each year to then figure out at this time of year what the rates will be. So it's a perpetual grind between that and then every 3 years, the behemoth of the general rate cases that occur. I guess one last thing to say about this year's rate adjustments in the general rate case, and part of the reason why these numbers are so stratospheric is that a lot of this is because of the kind of the follow through on the negotiations that were struck around getting PG&E out of its bankruptcy and addressing the wildfire risk that came to a head in 2019, 2020, and has been lingering. And so a large part of the additional spend that was authorized, that was atypical, above and beyond what has historically been needed, was for hardening of grid infrastructure. It was about tree trimming, it was about undergrounding main power lines, it's about insulating other power lines. And so a lot of the grand debate that parties had in that case that we were in kind of the periphery to, wires and poles are not our expertise, was just how much of that do we need? Do we really need 50% of the wires undergrounded, or can we do 25% and insulate more of the wires? And so a lot of it was negotiating around that aspect. Another big area where there was a lot of money in sway was dealing with the implications of the inflation that's been observed in the economy. And these rate cases authorize rate adjustments for the next 3 or 4 years forward. So there was a lot of debate about, is this trajectory of inflation that we've been seeing a start of a continued trend, or have we hit the peak and is it going to be going down in the next couple of years? And therefore, how much inflationary adjustment should the commission allow for the utility to include in their revenue requirements? Because at the end of the day, PG&E's operations is a tremendous amount of money, and even a percentage up or down can be a tremendous amount of money more or less collected from ratepayers. So anyway, that's pretty deep in the weeds, but that's a kind of a glimpse of Public Utilities Commission and some of the things they do.
Can you just clarify something? So I heard everything you just said, and I'm really trying to absorb and understand it all. So are you saying that because PG&E might have not made the best decisions in the past, in terms of how they allocated money and what they invested in, and didn't invest in, like, that caused things like the blow up, the gas pipeline explosion. So are you saying that if those things occur, PG&E can then come back, they can declare bankruptcy, but then come back to the CPUC and say, well, we can't really function unless you give us this enormous rate increase. And so they don't really end up paying the piper, we do.
Yeah, I think that's generally accurate. Try not to sound too cynical. It can very much be along the lines of, well, you have given us, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but hundreds of millions of dollars to trim trees over the last 20 years, and that money's gone. We may not have trimmed as many trees as we pledged to, but guess what? We need another $100 million to trim the next round of trees, or underground the next round of lines, and it's very much, preventing wildfires is in everyone's interest, but they're strongly motivated because it's very much in their shareholders' interest to avoid any liabilities going forward too. But it's on the public ratepayers' dime that gets done.
So does the CPUC get into the weeds with a utility like PG&E and say, do they scrutinize how they spent the money and how they gave, pay dividends to stockholders? Do they scrutinize that and then use that information when they're going to make a decision about a huge general rate increase like that?
Yeah, they very much weigh all of that. Past actions by the utilities, past spend by the utilities. The rate of returns are highly charged topic whenever they come up again before the commission.
Then do they make their analysis public?
They generally do. They'll publish their papers, or they'll convene workshops where they have their staff analysis. Sometimes they rely more heavily on in-house Public Utilities Commission staff reports and staff analysis. Other times they rely more heavily on the, say, the applicant, the utility that's making the proposal, to defend their claims, then tempered by other parties critiquing those claims, and really relying on the intervener process to vet the validity of what's being asked more than anything else. So perhaps there's not as much internal analysis as you might think within the Public Utilities Commission in certain areas. In some areas, they really rely heavily on external interveners, or they rely heavily on the Public Advocates Office, which is kind of its own offshoot, its own branch, to be the one that is vetting whether this request is reasonable or not. And it can really vary based upon what expertise they have and the depth of knowledge that say the Public Advocates Office has around infrastructure hardening, and determining whether that what's in the request is reasonable or not.
And who provides, in practicality, oversight of the CPUC? Just the interveners?
Well, the interveners, we intervene to try to temper more reasonable outcomes, but the 5 commissioners, again, are appointed by the governor. So they answer to the governor, and they have each other on speed dial. So that's the main leg of accountability, I'd say, is back to the governor. There are very much dynamics that play out where there may be, say, a decision the commission's reached that is less favorably viewed, and then some of the members of the legislature and some of their committees will request for the leadership of the commission to come out and defend their positions, explain themselves on certain matters. And there is some back and forth, but they don't have direct, while the legislature can keep writing laws, then direct the utility to do something or prohibit them from doing something, they don't have, say, direct oversight into the kind of more day-to-day operations. Good questions.
So how would you grade the CPUC on their performance in the last 5 years? Is that Are you allowed to answer that question? If you're not, it's fine. I mean, how are they doing a good job?
Commission, there, and I'll say this too about PG&E, there are a lot of extremely talented, well-intended individuals comprising both of those organizations that are really trying to do the best work they can. Sometimes it's just politics that gets in the way and dictates what's going to happen. Sometimes it's just sometimes it can be a lack of involvement from interveners, others stepping in to say, hey, no, this is a bad idea, and here's why, and here's a better idea instead. If no one's paying attention, it's a lot easier for things to just kind of proceed and get a rubber stamp. So I definitely don't want to cast blame one way or another, but it's not a perfect process by any means. And it can very much be a black box sometimes in terms of why the commission lands on where they do within a case. They don't necessarily just take what the applicants ask for and rubber stamp it. Sometimes they come up with an entirely different proposed decision in the case that varies tremendously from what anyone asked for or sought to have happen at the very beginning of the case.
It seems so mysterious, actually,
It
this whole
is.
process. So, anyway, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry
No.
to go into the weeds, but I just wanted to try to understand.
These are good questions, and I'm glad we have some time for this presentation and conversation. The ISO, the California Independent System Operator, I give them only one little line here: maintaining the reliability of California's primary electricity grid. And what I mean by primary electricity grid is the bulk of the transmission infrastructure in California. It's not all of it, but a vast majority of it. And they were brought about in the aftermath of the energy crisis in 99, 2000, 2001, when there was rampant market manipulation that played out that destabilized the service provision of electricity. And some of that came from manipulation around how transmission assets were being operated and whether they were being taken offline unnecessarily or overloaded with too much electricity being powered through them. And it really brought to the forefront this need for there to be a single traffic cop, making sure that the grid is operating smoothly in all hours of the day and all days of the year. The ISO is interesting in that it's a benefit corporation empowered by the state, but it answers to the federal government, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the National Energy Regulatory Commission, and or Energy NERC. I'm trying to remember that. Anyhow, they have the kind of nitty gritty of just keeping the lights on, candidly, and they have this elaborate control room that you can go and visit in Folsom that looks a bit like the launch control room for NASA, where they've got lights and boards and computers everywhere, and it's all monitoring in real time the power flow across the various circuits in the grid. They also do a lot in terms of market design and in terms of importing and exporting of electricity into and out of the state. And there's a lot more growing on that front, where California, sometime back, we had a presentation with the board around the concept of regionalization, which is whether or not California's energy market should combine with and grow with into other states to unlock better efficiencies of grid operations and economics of energy markets, and perhaps heighten reliability as well. But there's also, because they answer to FERC and because every state has their own sovereignty as well, it unlocks all these jurisdictional questions and governance questions, and it's far from a simple political conversation to have around how to do that. But there's
then?
no, it's ongoing.
Regionalization? Okay.
There's been a couple of rounds of legislative efforts that haven't gone anywhere, but there's now a interstate commission's not the right word, but organization that's been convened involving, I think it's about 5 or 6 states that are exploring this issue further and trying to find perhaps the lower hanging fruit that they can start approaching for a larger arrangement. There are different services that an ISO provides, like transmission operation, but then there's also the buying and selling, the wholesale market transactions of electricity that happens both in a day ahead market and in the real-time market. And there's a lot of opportunities for market growth that can be done without then handing the keys to transmission oversight off to a regionalized body. I see we have a question on the screen. Kathleen?
Me, yeah, hi, thanks. I think I missed something. You said it's a benefit corporation, it answers to the feds. What is its relationship? Where does it fit in terms of state government and how is it created or constituted?
Sure. So the earlier question about governance, here too, the commissioners of the ISO are appointed. They have a nomination process and they're appointed at the state government level. They're appointed by the governor, confirmed in a similar fashion to public PUC commissioners. So it's this kind of interesting balance between, it's not a full public sector entity, it's a benefit corporation instead. And I think that was done in part because they were trying to, well, I don't have the full history there, but I think they're trying to attract and compensate the top tier talent that they could find to perform this crucial task. But grid operations, transmission level operations, especially transmission between state borders, is a federal issue. And so they do ultimately have to answer to FERC. They have their tariffs that they have to get approval from the federal government to amend or adjust. So it's an interesting one in that it has this overlap between state governance and state structure and federal state governance and structure. And with the regionalization conversation, there's a lot of this concern around, if we regionalize, do we lose some of that state control over what the ISO currently does? And is it worth that loss of control in exchange for what we might gain from regionalizing?
Yeah, got it. Thank you. It was the
Hopefully that helps. Yeah.
appointed by the governor part was the part I missed, I think. Thanks.
So how many of those people are there on
I
that?
believe there's 5 there too. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure there are 5. And I think we can go to the next slide to keep it moving. So 2 other state and regulatory entities, the California Energy Commission, which when you've got the Public Utilities Commission and then the Energy Commission, that should make you scratch your head a little bit to begin with, but they seem like they're duplicative. They're not.
Yeah.
The Energy Commission regulates the publicly owned utilities rather than the investor owned utilities regulated by the CPUC on the prior slide. A big part of their purpose back in the day was to do the permitting and review of any new power plants that needed to be built in California. And from that, they've grown into performing a lot more of the kind of energy sector wide planning efforts that the state needs. And then a lot of the grant funding administration and innovations support through state funds. So they're right here and now, for example, we have the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed at the federal level. It has a lot of money behind it, and that money is being divvied out to the various states. Well, a lot of that is flowing to California to the Energy Commission, where it's then the Energy Commission's job to figure out where those funds will be best spent in compliance with the requirements that the federal government imposed on those funds. They have done, to their credit, they did a lot in terms of advancing and promoting energy efficiency here in California. And a lot of that was motivated out of that power plant permitting and review, where there was, I don't have the full anecdote remembered, but there was a proposal to effectively build nuclear plants all up and down the California coastline to meet the forecasted load growth that was anticipated with all of these novel technologies and more sophisticated homes and appliances and so forth that were being expected. And thankfully, some of the good folks at the CEC took pause and explored what could we do if we could just get more efficient appliances put in people's homes and get them to use less power. Maybe we could avoid the need for a few more power plants. And that's really where the concept of Californian energy efficiency came from, is from the Energy Commission. So they do a lot of planning. There's a report that they publish every 2 years, which is called the Integrated Energy Policy Report. We call it the IEPR, but it's IEPR. It's issued every 2 years and updated on the off year, and it's an effort to kind of collectively forecast where electricity demand and supply, the state of supply and demand is headed in California, and then they tend to devote a chapter or two to some more forward-looking topics of like EV adoption rates and where we think the electric vehicle adoption rates in California are headed, or other issue areas that the rate of deployment of rooftop solar and how much self-generation there might be occurring in California, things like that. But for those that are curious, it's a good report to look at to see just kind of at the state view how they're thinking about energy and cleaning up our energy, continuing to move to a cleaner supply of electricity in California. Then the Air Resources Board.
Can you go back for a second? Are those
Sure.
people appointed by the governor? as
Yeah,
well?
they're also appointed by the governor.
And could you give us an example of the publicly owned utility versus the
Yeah, I was curious about that.
investment-owned utility?
Sure, so publicly owned utility, the nearest example, well, one near example is Palo Alto, another Alameda, San Francisco. So the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, they have their own public utility that serves some of San Francisco. They then have their CCA program that they've started up to help start serving more of San Francisco. But yeah, San Francisco is a complicated one because you can walk down the street and there'll be a Muni customer, a CCA customer, a PG&E customer, and there's parallel infrastructure and everything. But the biggest municipal, sometimes they're called municipal utilities, other times they're called publicly owned utilities. Some of the biggest examples, like one of the more celebrated ones, one of the larger ones out there is the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, SMUD. And then there's maybe not as well celebrated, but certainly large, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, LADWP, that is a very prominent public utility that operates in California. They have a very different set of jurisdictional rules and requirements, and it tends to be a little on the lighter side than what the, say, PG&E has to adhere to and what we have to adhere to. And we're in this kind of limbo between these two models where we don't own the wires and poles. We're not a vertically integrated utility, but we're a public sector entity. So we're kind of this muni light model is one way that I've heard community choice described. But because our customers, and because the way the statute's set up, CCAs can only serve investor-owned utility customers. We can't compete, say, with SMUD for their customers in their area. So by nature, our customers are our customers, but they're also an investor-owned utilities customers. And so this is why we're always kind of joined at the hip with the Public Utilities Commission and have a lighter interface with the Energy Commission.
Who decided, I know this is a fair question, but obviously who decided why isn't Palo Alto allowed to go the other way and San Mateo allowed, why is it that who decided who gets split into the PG&E versus the non-PG&E world? And then why is that immutable?
Most
in a macro sense, not in a like.
Well, the vast majority of the publicly owned utilities that operate in California have been here for a very long time. And so a lot of it is that they formed when the IOUs, like PG&E, were forming as well. And so the service area was still limited by how far they could run the poles to serve someone. And so the service areas didn't really butt up against each other as much. And so if a municipality wanted to establish their own electricity service, they could go through the steps of creating their own electric utility, and they weren't having to, say, buy up PG&E's infrastructure the way you would have to today. There just wasn't that infrastructure there until they established this utility. San Francisco, as I mentioned, is kind of complicated, but interesting example where you've got distribution lines running through the city, transmission lines and distribution lines, some owned by the utility, the San Francisco utility, some owned by PG&E, some they're not really sure who owns what. You know, like a light public street light goes out and it's a bit of a head scratcher of whose infrastructure is it and who has to pay for it. But they try to kind of create very clear service territory lines to avoid that kind of complication. So that's why you don't see like going down the block in Palo Alto, well, this customer is a PG&E customer and that customer is a Palo Alto customer.
But is it really immutable? I mean, wasn't there some talk about when PG&E was just, you know, screwing up royally, wasn't there some talk about it being taken over?
Yeah, there's periodically there's conversation around that.
Right.
There, I'm not an attorney and I don't have the depth of knowledge here, but there's been discussion around exercising, taking over the infrastructure and asserting either an eminent domain or another mechanism along those lines to, there have been actually a number of different bids by certain municipalities, San Francisco, I believe San Jose as well, have made bids to PG&E saying, hey, we would like to buy out your infrastructure and your rights to serve our community and do it ourselves. And PG&E generally laughs at that and it doesn't go very far. And there's really been no political pressure to force PG&E to the table. So that effort hasn't been fruitful, but there's certainly been, say, when another bankruptcy rolls around, there's certainly conversation around, is there an opportunity here to take over the reins?
And that's gonna be my last question, because I'm asking too many questions, but, so if that were to happen, let's say there were another bankruptcy, which one of these illustrious bodies would decide that that is a decent idea and it should be entertained?
Well, again, the utilities are directly regulated by Public Utilities Commission, but if they have to go through a bankruptcy process, they have to go through a bankruptcy court. And it's overseen by the judge assigned there, but the once, for example, in this last example, when PG&E went through a bankruptcy and they got through the bankruptcy court, there was then very much an active negotiation between the governor's office and the legislature to craft a package that would allow PG&E to financially be able to continue to operate, even with that mark on their financial record. So it's very much to borrow a term that probably will make some toenails cringe, they're very much in too big to fail state. And the alternate solutions, a lot of the ones that have been floated around, like municipalization and such, are very complex, are very complicated and very risky too. If someone were to want to buy out PG&E's infrastructure, it's hard to know what the real state of that infrastructure is and the reliability of that infrastructure. And taking on that ownership then takes on the liability of that infrastructure as well. So it's complicated. I mean, you mentioned the San Bruno pipeline as an example.
Yeah.
I don't think there are many parties out there wanting to go buy 50, 60, 70-year-old pipelines from a utility and take over ownership of them.
This deserves a book. This topic deserves a book. Okay.
There are some good books out there, absolutely, about the electric industry. Maybe not that end as much, but the fire, bankruptcy, that side. California Burning is one of those books that's been very good.
What was it again?
California Burning is a more
Burning.
recently published book
Okay.
that's all about that aspect of the history.
I don't know, we spent a lot of time on this, but assets have value even in bankruptcy. If
Yeah.
PG&E were to be sold, you'd have to pay for the value of the asset. I know this because I once bought a substation. And they charged me the replacement value. They charged me the replacement value, not the book value.
Wow.
And that's what we're up against.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right, we should let him proceed with slides, sorry.
I'm glad we're having a robust conversation. That's really good. My objective is to have a good conversation here, not necessarily to get through the slides, but.
Okay.
So the Air Resources Board is the last regulatory body I'll mention. We interface with them pretty sparingly, candidly. They do oversee some of the state's more important legacy environmental and climate programs, like the Cap and Trade program. And the low carbon fuel standard is another example where we have a little more direct interface with. These are some of the programs that are established by AB 32 back in the day, Fran Pavley's bill, that really got the ball rolling in terms of getting California to get serious about addressing climate change and adopting renewable energy and decreasing carbon emissions. So they're continuing to operate those programs. And they are very much focused on the Air Resources Board, so they're focused on air quality, but there's more and more connectivity, not just to monitoring criterion pollutants like sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide and things like that, but linking it more back to carbon dioxide emissions and more back to air quality, local air quality in local communities and making sure that those gas power plants that are still situated and running in urban areas are really meeting their emissions requirements that they should be meeting in the first place. They do focus a bit on clean transportation as well. So there is some interface there in terms of our EV programs as well. But generally, the Air Resources Board, as I said, like ballparking Public Utilities Commission's maybe 70% of our bandwidth. Air Resources Board is often maybe 1 to 5%. It's really a pretty light presence. So we have, if we had our own power plants that had emissions associated with them, we would have a much more active dialogue with the Air Resources Board, but thankfully we are not in that business, so we don't have to worry about those aspects.
Are they appointed by the governor too?
Yes, yeah.
Get to know the governor.
The governor has a lot of power in California. And there are some familiar faces that start showing up across these commissions too. So former CPUC commissioner is now the chair of the Air Resources Board, for example. Next slide. So we've already kind of rattled some of these off in the course of conversation, but here's just kind of a sampling of different key issue areas that we engage in, some of the acronyms that accompany them. I will talk a bit more about the power charge and difference adjustment later. Lately, there's been a lot of interest in rates and in more time responsive, price responsive rates. This is something both the Public Utilities Commission and the Energy Commission have both been really focused on lately. In part because they see that as we move to a cleaner electricity supply, and we've probably seen conversations around things like the duct graph, where we have this abundance of solar being generated in the middle of the day, and then at nighttime there's no solar and there's a lot less clean electricity being supplied. The aims here are to make rates more structured to provide signals to the end user to get them to use the power when it's the cheapest during the day, or alternatively design it to use the power when it's the cleanest during certain points of the day, but it's time-based price signaling and rates. There's a lot of conversation around that, and there's several efforts to move to more novel, if not more complicated rate designs that are percolating in the regulatory space these days. There's net energy metering, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and the new acronym that's come out of that, the net value billing tariff, which is the, I guess the new more PC way of saying NEM 3.0, that is going through its paces of becoming implemented. It's all been approved, but of course now it's taking the utilities a while to get their billing and infrastructure ready for it all. I mentioned the integrated resources plan. This is something that is required of all electrical, so it's required of the investor-owned utilities, all the CCAs, and the electric service providers, which are the direct access providers, where we all have to submit plans to the commission, Public Utilities Commission, of how we're going to meet our electricity supply going forward, and how clean and green it's going to be, and how reliable it's going to be. And the state takes that information, the commission takes that information and puts it all together, and then also in parallel runs their own analysis of what they think the state needs to meet its collective forecasted demand over the next several years, and compares the two. We may have a lot more solar in our portfolio or a lot more wind in the portfolio than what the state agency thinks might need to be needed. Or we may have a lot more storage than they factor into that, or maybe differences of how much offshore wind is really gonna happen, or so forth. So it's all about trying to help inform what the right resource mix is to supply California with its clean electricity future. Both from the load serving entity, which is an industry term for what we in the electric utilities are, from our perspectives, as well as from the state agency, state down perspective, and trying to match or marry those two while keeping things reliable too. So making sure that there's, as I mentioned, like with the example of solar, it's great in the middle of the day and it's not good at nighttime. Well, if everyone just relied on solar, we would have outages at nighttime. So it's making sure we have the resources we need to actually keep the lights on through all hours of the day and all days of the year. And resource adequacy is a state program that is it's historically been just a one-year program for the coming year, making sure there are enough power plants under contract, ready to operate in the event that they are needed to operate to provide electricity to the grid. It's a reliability program, but it's a short-term, 1 year, 3 year forward sort of a arrangement to help keep the lights on in the near term. But the IRP is more about making sure new power plants are being built quickly enough to meet the demand that we expect to have happen in years to come. The renewable portfolio standard, I don't need to go through all these, but this one's the state's way of measuring just how clean our electricity supply is based on the renewable content. And that's something that I'm proud to say the CCAs have been doing a stellar job of, and have been way ahead of the curve from day one. And then programmatically, number of different topics. I spoke to some of these already: building electrification and transportation electrification and building decarbonization. Some of our local generation programs like the Disadvantaged Community Green Tariff, which for the loan customers who are able to participate in that program, they get a 20% discount on their total bill, which is a pretty significant savings. And it's all tied to local renewable resource near to their community that is helping serve their electricity needs. So it's a smattering. We've got an acronym cheat sheet we give to our board that is constantly being updated. It is hundreds of acronyms long. You may get a copy of it as well, being on the CIC there. There you go. So, and they're overnight, they're always out of date. There's something acronym someone's come up with all the time. We can go on to the next slide. So I'll try to be brief here. This will get pretty deep in the weeds, but this is a very important concept for CCA operations, unfortunately so. But the power charge and difference adjustment, PCIA, is what we call a non-bypassable charge. It's something our customers have to pay. There's no getting around it. It's there to recover the above market costs of, as we say, legacy utility procurement commitments. So kind of a way to think of it is back in 2009, 2010, 2011, PG&E and the other utilities were charged with procuring a bunch of renewable energy because the renewable portfolio standard had been put into law, and this was our path forward. And they did. They went out and inked lots of contracts for new solar resources to get the renewable industry up and running. But they didn't really factor into what happens if we lose customers. And so that's what this, and sure enough, right around that time was when CCA is performing and growing, and it went from being a little tiny speck in the ocean to now a significant share of PG&E service areas served by CCAs. Well, if they bought all that power expecting to have at least the same number of customers they had in 2010 and present day, they would, if they didn't have this regulatory mechanism, they'd be in a rude surprise. They'd have a whole lot of power they didn't need, and they'd have to be turning around and selling it to the market, perhaps at a loss. What this does is it guarantees that any costs that they incur that are above the present market value are paid for by the customers that left their service area. So it's a term that is commonly used in PCIA space. It's called ratepayer indifference, which is that if I go and join a CCA, my neighbor who isn't in a CCA shouldn't have to pay more because of it. They should be indifferent to the fact that I've exercised my choice to join a CCA or vice versa. So that's kind of the principle. This is enabled through state law, and it's been examined and re-examined many times over the years through the regulatory process, but it's can be a very significant part of our customers' bills, and right now, presently, largely to credit of where the energy markets have been. It's kind of the silver lining to the fact that energy costs have been so high, and the PCIA is low because there's not a lot of above market costs that need to be recovered through it. So it's something our customers pay. It appears on their bills alongside our generation charges. We've been working for years to try to get a more equal or equivalent way of this information being conveyed on both bundled PG&E only customers and CCA customers, so that the PCIA is more commonly presented. It's kind of hidden within the bundled customers' bills, but they are paying it too. And just kind of fast forwarding down to the bottom of the slide, you'll see some of the percentages there. So 2021, the PCIA represented roughly 44% of PG&E's generation rate. So that would leave us 56% left to recover our own operational costs through. Versus 2022, it was down to 13, and then the last year is roughly 2%. We even saw a few, the PCIA is kind of teased out by vintage, which is a measure of when someone left the utilities service for CCA service. They leave in 2016, 2019, et cetera. Some of the most recent vintages, so like if someone left to join the CCA in 2022, in 2023, when they do this rate calculus, some of those customers actually had a negative value where they were actually saving the rest of the ratepayers money by no longer needing that electricity that PG&E bought for them. Because it was actually cheaper to rely on the contracted power than it was to go to the market to buy new power. Next slide.
Jeremy, is the PCIA on the bill? Does it show on the bill? It does?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's shown as a separate charge on the bill.
No, probably like less than 1% of people understand it.
Yeah, and what's really confusing about this charge though is that it's on the generation portion of the bill.
Oh.
Whereas if you look, you get really into the weeds of your bill, you'll see there's a whole long non-bypassable charge section of the bill that has, I don't know how many are on there now, but 10, 15 different charges on there for all sorts of different public objectives that have been layered in over the years. But because this is generation cost related, it's been kept on the generation bill. And so for CCA customers, it shows up alongside the CCA's charges and creates all kinds of confusion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shows up on the transmission distribution page.
Yeah, it's on both. Yeah. So
positive on one and a negative on the other.
yeah, it looks, and that's where a lot of the confusion comes from. It's like, are they charging us again? And then
I really explains bills to people that they don't.
yeah. What we're trying to do is to just get it to show up the same way, whether you're a PG&E customer or a PCE customer on the bill. Sounds simple, but it's incredibly hard to get the commission and utilities to do that. And I won't even get into how they actually print these bills, the programming that they use to do that, but it's ancient technology that they create those bills with.
Even the name was a fight, because when Marin and Sonoma did it, it was a fight, and then we joined it, it was a fight, because it should be called we lost you as a customer charge, not this ridiculously ambiguous thing. So, but that's a lost fight from a decade ago, so.
It's a This is such a weird oddity for this industry, because if you think of any kind of competitive market, there is no guarantee to any business, other business out there, that if a competitor shows up and takes your business away, that you'll be made whole for it. It's a wild concept, but it was determined that it was better for the public good this way. So next slide. And this is just kind of an illustrative example of those numbers on the prior slide. The market value, so again, the PCIA collects above market costs. The market value is determined by a few different components. The main largest component is what we call the brown power component, which is just the wholesale energy cost. But there's also a valuation of resource adequacy, how much capacity that resource that's in the PCIA portfolio has and its market value. There's a valuation of the renewable content. So if it's an early solar project, like I mentioned as an example, that has some renewable value to it. So there's some credit, some market valuation credit there. But this is really to illustrate just what happens when the market fluctuates. We've had some exceptionally high market conditions in 2023 and 2022. And it's the aftermath of it still kind of playing out in the utility rates and in the generation rate adjustment that's just gone into effect, where if you recall about a year ago, gas prices were through the roof. Everyone's heating bills were through the roof. The heating bills are just a direct pass through of the wholesale purchase amount plus what markup the gas utility has to charge. With the electricity business, it's not a direct pass through. So right now for 2024, PG&E's newly approved generation rate is in part recovering some of the costs they had to incur back in the winter of 2022 and early 2023 from the really high wholesale gas prices. So there's a lag in their accounting process that plays out that then informs where the rates have to head. Anyway, I'm getting too far in the weeds, but
That implies that coming up, it's gonna drop below maybe 5-6% instead of 2%. If we're now catching up and making gas prices higher, that delta is gonna drop, isn't it?
yeah, so for this example where the blue bar keeps growing and growing, that's not necessarily a trend. It can very easily switch the other way around. So last winter, the gas prices were really high. Now the gas prices are considerably lower than they were then. So a year from now, when we're going through the same rate accounting process, the market valuation is going to be a lot lower than it is for this iteration. And so the PCIA will probably be a fair amount higher for our customers in a couple of years. But this is in the weeds, but interesting for this year, where gas prices got a lot cheaper from end of 2022 into 2023, but resource adequacy is continuing to get more expensive. There's now the renewable attributes are in higher demand than they have been in the past, as the utilities are realizing, we don't have enough renewable power that we procured, and we're getting the RPS compliance requirements are ramping up. The percentage they have to meet is getting higher and higher. So there are still supply chain delays playing out in the market to create new renewable power plants. So the premium for renewable attributes has gone through the roof too. So while gas prices have gone down, capacity and renewables have gone up, and it's kind of worked out to be a bit of a wash. So the market value collectively hasn't really moved much, but the components have moved around quite a bit in this last year. Anyway, don't mean to get so far in the weeds. Next slide. And this is, I think, related to the last slide I have here. So as we've spoken about already, there's a lot of rate uncertainty. PCIA is a big one because it's so sensitive to market conditions. But there's just other rate uncertainty, a lot of rate volatility going on, like the general rate cases rate hike that was just approved. There's certainly, I'd say, just a growing trend around affordability concerns is coming from the ever rising rates that I think is really going to be a forefront focal point in this year in its policy discussions at the state level. And it certainly is difficult for us to plan around when things like the PCIA rate can vary so much from year to year just based on wholesale market conditions. There's also just a lot of crises continuing to play out in the electricity sector and outside of the electricity sector. I mentioned things like the supply chain delays. There's also, this is less directly related to us, but for example, transformers for distribution lines the supply of transformers is very much out of whack with the demand that's out there now. So there's a lot more demand than there's supply, to put more plainly. So there's a long backlog.
Where were they created?
I don't know, but I would imagine a lot are created overseas and
Yeah.
brought in. And as we've had a lot of infrastructure damage and fires and so forth, and then suddenly have to replace them, or they're doing the undergrounding and the insulating and they have to install new units, it's being held back because of these supply chain delays, or at least being made more expensive because of these delays. There's just a growing appetite for renewable energy, which is not a bad thing, but it's more competition in the marketplace as well that's playing out. And there's certainly here in California in the last few years, we kind of spoke about this a bit with like the wildfire, the resolution of the wildfire liabilities that we spoke to earlier, and just this general appetite in the last couple of years, especially after we had the reliability problems, say in 2020, the extremely high heat summer and the wildfire conditions. There's been a lot of political attention towards making sure those lights do not go out. And there are industry standards around like the sort of 1 in 10 event that they're willing to tolerate when they're planning standards of like 1 in 10 years, there could be an outage under these conditions, or 1 in 100 years. And those measures are done to temper the costs. If you want to prevent an outage from happening under any condition foreseeable, you're going to pay a whole lot for all of that redundant infrastructure to provide that guarantee. But if you can tolerate some degree of risk, you can save some money. And it's all kind of coming to a head to say that reliability has been the heavy focus over the last several years. And it's been reliability almost at any cost. And now we're coming to the bills are starting to show up. We're having to pay the bills for all those expenses on the credit card that we've been making. And that's why I think this year, and not just this year, from here going forward, there's going to be a lot more conversation around affordability and about just forward operating costs of the utilities, and especially as we, for example, are trying to get people to use cleaner technologies, switch to electric vehicles, switch to heat pumps in their homes. It's harder and harder to convince them when they see their electricity bill just going up and up and up and up. So it's very much a timely conversation. And on the more positive sides, there's just people's relationships to the energy sector are becoming much more sophisticated with time as they install these devices, and as people just get more interested in learning about where their electricity comes from and what it means for the environment and what it means for forward generations. And it's also just, we're in this period of innovation and rapid technology development where our vision of what the grid will look like 10 years from now and what it's actually going to look like 10 years from now are probably going to be pretty tremendously different just based on that innovation that's going on. So that's, I believe, the end of the slide. I might have a comments, questions slide at the end of this one, but that's the rest of it. Appreciate the conversation. Happy to answer any questions. I haven't really been keeping on at time, and I'm sure I've run long, so.
That's Jason and my fault.
Sorry.
Do you guys have any other questions for Jeremy? Hasn't had a chance to ask yet.
Well, thanks again for the time.
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff.
You know where I work, you've got my contact information. If you have a question, don't hesitate to ask. Happy to answer it. If I don't know the answer, I'll try to find the person who does have it for you.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
this is really great. We've been hoping to do this for a long time, so.
Sure. Happy to be here.
Okay, thank you so much. Right, are there any public comments or questions for Jeremy?
I don't see any raised hands.
Okay, thank you. All right, perfect. All right, we will move on then to review the results of the Community Advisory Committee satisfaction survey. Vanessa.
Yeah, so I will pull up the results that were from the survey. Thank you everyone for filling it out. We had almost 100% participation. And the results are also posted on the website for you all to reference after the meeting. All right, I'll hand it over to Kristen to highlight any themes that emerged.
Sure, yes. So thank you, as Charlotte mentioned, thank you so much to everyone who filled out the survey. We had, we heard from just about everybody. And so pretty good marks there on the progress the CAC has made in 2022 toward meeting its objectives. And so let's scroll down. And so, yeah, most folks are clustering around the 4 out of 5. And why the rating? Folks feel it's been productive. The CAC has appropriately asserted itself in a few decisions. But also some folks who feel like they're too new to kind of weigh in on this. But also some comment that there are a few recommendations the board and the committee had limited impact. Yeah, progress, but room for improvement. It's kind of any major themes here I'm missing?
Or if anybody wants to elaborate on something that you said
Yes.
in regard to this question, feel free.
Yeah, please.
This is our chance to talk about how we want to function.
All right, so scrolling down. Next question, how satisfied with your experience serving on the CAC? Oh, these are very nice numbers. I'm so glad that folks are generally feeling pretty happy here. 50% give a 5 out of 5. Another 41% give a 4 out of 5. And someone give a neutral 3. So scrolling down again, some folks saying, kind of too new to weigh in much. Good connection, learning a lot, collaborative spirit, but also, since that the recommendations are not incorporated into final decisions, it requires time, appreciating the support that PC gives and sending agendas advance, feeling fulfilled and hopefully making a difference, loving being a part of PCE, want to improve participation in working groups, there's still more to do. So appreciate all that feedback. And again, anybody want to, elaborate on this? Okay, so we'll scroll down.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Somebody commented that CAC recommendations were not incorporated into final decisions or rationale was not provided. Well, that person might want to stay anonymous, but I was just curious about that. And if that needs to stay anonymous, that's okay. I guess I would just plant a flag in that to say, how can we improve on that?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think the CAC has done a good job this year, taking actions when it seemed appropriate and drafting good recommendations. And what happens to those recommendations? Those recommendations get communicated to the bodies that are making final decisions. It is an advisory group that the board, doesn't have to take your recommendations. The board hears them. I'm not quite sure what else to say to that, other than, can communicate better about why recommendations were taken or not. Perhaps we can do more on, maybe staff can do more. Yeah,
And maybe this is like a communication thing and we all need to do better. Can we work together to find opportunities for CAC to do the A part of our name, which is advisory? Because last year, and Cheryl and Jason did an excellent job helping us craft recommendations. But it felt like our role was, you know, receiving a lot of reports and FYIs and a lot of really interesting and engaging discussion. But I didn't feel that there were very many opportunities to advise or contribute to PCE in a meaningful way beyond just, you know, we're having discussions. This is fascinating work. And I think most of us who sit on the CAC love PCE and the work that's done. But I think we're still grappling for ways to be supportive in a more meaningful way versus just chat about the different things going on and get reports.
yeah. This last year, we've been really serious on the staff level and taking our commitment seriously about any time the customer facing initiative comes before the board, it come before the CAC first, and we give you the option to take action on it. So we've had a record number of items listed as action items this last year. It's been a pretty big departure from previous years. So that is a change in how we've operated this year, that we brought a lot more options to this, a lot more items to this action items. I mean, you haven't always chosen to take action, but the option has been.
So just to clarify, Diane, you're looking for more opportunities for ideas to be initiated here and recommended? I mean, to come in terms of advising on something that's generated in this room?
Well, we can't take the place of professional staff.
Right.
At an agency, there's a broad staff that's very talented, and I'm not trying to challenge that in any way. I mean, this is just my perspective. It feels sometimes that we advise on things that are already fully baked.
Okay.
But maybe that's just the way this works, and there are just really limited opportunities to have an impact. Still, I would love to revisit and collaborate with staff to find ways for us to be more useful to staff. And in the past, that's been, you know, volunteering, tabling, and that was curtailed with COVID. So maybe those opportunities will resurface, and, you know, and that's sort of the retail side of it. That's great. But are there other ways as new programs are developed, as marketing strategies are rolled out, for us to kind of be that first wave of guinea pigs in the marketing strategies, or with pilot projects, like with the EV charging?
Because we are working with we're doing a brand update this year. So we do plan to bring, you know, early concepts to probably March, actually.
And I really quickly, I think last year, and maybe I'm misremembering this, but in the surveys, that sentiment was almost, was the main thing that Cheryl and I have been looking to work on. So that sentiment was more there. And I do think for me, the outside of these meetings time that I've spent on stuff this year with Cheryl 10 times as much as me, has been addressing exactly this point. And I think that the working groups we're in now are trying to be reflective of exactly that. We're directly engaging with staff at the starting point, but we haven't finished that yet. So I don't know if that will be better or the same or not. But I also think we've, at every juncture, we've brought up, and Robert's doing one right now, Stephen did it for the surplus. We've been invited and I think appreciated in those working groups and in those individual contributions at the outset, so that we aren't just reacting, we're being more proactive. And so I think any place, not to get the answer we want or to assume there'll be the result we want, but just so to make us feel valued. I think a big thing we've improved is trying to be, at least individually or a working group or collectively, there earlier on to give feedback. And at every time in the groups I've been in, the staff has always enjoyed that. At least this year. I won't say that was always the case in the past, but I feel like it has been okay, they're not just trying to tell me how to do my job, they're trying to give suggestions that seem to be appreciated. So I think while it's up there only once now, I think the proof will be in the pudding at the end of the year too. And I think it's gonna be, I mean, just from being that earlier, I think it's gonna be great. So is that helpful? That's my thinking on that one.
Let me get my take on it.
Yeah, Robert,
I
please.
heard a new term today called regenerative management. I was a manager most of my career, and it was always top down, chain of command. I tell my manager, he tells the supervisor, he tells the guy to go do the work. That's all out the window. It's just gonna go out the window. So regenerative management means we're part of the solution. We are helping to create that new entity, whatever that may be. I hope to, in this organization, my role here on the committee is to help create that new approach to the way we use electricity, why we need electricity, all those things, so that we're part of it. Thank you for bringing up the thing that I just participated in. I really enjoyed that. And I felt like I had something to say in reviewing those the proposals. And that's the kind of thing where we have a role, and I spent too many years managing, too many years working. I'd sure like to take some of that knowledge and information and pass it on to all of you, so that you can use it. And that's where this whole idea of regeneration comes into. Help us help you create a new way of creating energy and buying energy and using it. So it's long-winded, but that's what I'm looking for on this committee while I'm on it. It's a big part of it. As Diane said very well, you have a great staff. There's a very, very competent staff. I don't want to usurp that. I don't know enough to try, but I really want to be part of that new solution. The world is changing. The world is changing rapidly. And we're in a dire situation now. It's not doom and gloom. Let's figure out how we can go forward. So
Please help you all feel like.
I can't.
Okay, can we help? I'll help you feel like you're having a bigger contribution. I mean, like I said, we've put more items on as action items this year. I need fresh ideas, frankly, of how we can achieve this.
Dan, is anything like floating around in your head that you could share, or an example of when you had hoped it would occur and it didn't, or?
I think having a little bit of discussion about the budget and programmatic funding. And obviously we can't control that, but we can receive early drafts. Like everyone talks about the governor's budget and then there's the May revise. I'm not saying replicate that here. It's just that like normally with the budget kind of goes through iterations. We're proposing these programs, this level of funding and allocations. Having some discussion on that or actual like programmatic work.
Choices that are being made.
Choices, like at the board level, there's a lot of discussion of, oh my gosh, we had so many power outages, not the fault of PCE, but people are really concerned about losing power. Do we want to support more energy storage for people? Do we want to help get people away from fossil fuel generators and into clean batteries? I think that would have been the perfect opportunity for a CAC subcommittee to weigh in and to assist. Do we want to research? What does the Air Resources Board recommend? What's the latest and greatest? Are there opportunities like that where we can kind of buttress staff and add value in that these issues emerge and there's only so much staff time and effort to support them? But I felt like the certain board member comments over the past year about, can we respond better about these storms and outages? That felt like a great opportunity, although from a staff perspective, I can see that people are busy with their current, plans. And so could we have added value there? Yeah, that's just one example.
The discussion around programs and funding, it seems like it would be a chance each year, for us to advise, because there is some real talent in this room. And so that might be an example of how we could participate earlier, in terms of programmatic decisions or how money's being spent. I mean, just as an example.
Hand raised. Oh, hi, Kathleen, talk to us.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one positive example that I think might be this along the lines of what Diane is looking for, and that's one of the work groups that I'm on this year, the solar and storage working group. I mean, we work group members are actually going out and doing research and finding out about various programs that are and projects that are happening around the country, which staff are going to use to kind of develop some proposals for the board. And I kind of had the same feeling last year in my first year, like, okay, I'm receiving a lot of information, but I'm not sure what, I don't feel like I'm doing anything substantive. This year has felt very different, and largely it's the work that I'm doing on this particular working group where, there's something staff wanted to, research, but hey, having, 4 or 5 committee members all sort of sharing the load and going out and doing the research is, freeing up some of his time. And then we're going to work with him to put some proposals together. So it does feel like much more substantive. Like we just had a meeting right before this meeting and shared some of the preliminary information that we've gotten. And, we were getting this reaction of, hey, I haven't even heard of that before. So we're finding out about things that staff didn't know about and that could help inform what sort of recommendations go to the board. So, and Diane, maybe you need to join our work group.
Or chair one.
Yeah, but I mean, that to me is when we started working on this, I felt like, okay, now this is what I feel like I signed up for, is I'm actually contributing something and, helping to expand what staff would maybe be able to do on their own.
That's great to hear, Kathleen. Thanks. We need to do more of that, I guess. Cool. Okay. All right, thanks for bringing that up. I think that's really key, and keep bringing it up, please. I'm glad you did that.
So Cheryl, I have a few
Yeah.
things kind of related to that. So,
Please.
one idea I have is I like the working groups and how they work. We do them annually though. So maybe if staff could be reminded quarterly or something, that if they just need 1 or 2 PAC members to help with something new that's come up, it's not really a working group. It might
Right.
just be for a couple meetings or very short period, that like, just to kind of get a refresh and, if there could be just some cadence of checking in with staff, right? To see where they might need us.
That's a good
And
idea.
then the second is, I think the comment there was, I'm not sure if it meant about the recommendations that we make to the board. But one thing I miss, and I think this is because our meetings are now in person and they don't necessarily just join online, but was our board reps kind of coming to our meetings. So it was nice during the pandemic that like 2 or 3 board meetings or board members would consistently come to our meetings. And we had, kind of a couple of them that were assigned to us, right? And it didn't mean they had to come to every meeting. I think we had the good fortune that they did.
Well, Jeff out
but-
was the first.
Yeah, so Jeff and Donna, and then, but also Rick, he came when he was chair. So I think it just, that's another avenue where maybe then the committee members feel like, even though it's not a formal recommendation, but we're getting something in the ear of a board member that they might later recall when they're at a meeting to take action on, or just say, oh, actually, I remember the CAC talked about that.
Right. Now, that's a good point. We could probably integrate better with that. Those folks.
Yeah, so maybe if we could see if the board would be willing again to kind of appoint 2 or 3 people that would be willing to each come to 2 or 3 meetings a year or something like that.
We have some appointed right now, but we've not been seeing them as much. So
Yeah.
That's a good point. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Any other comments? Okay.
It's fun. The staff, thank you for the kind ratings there. Looks like you're pretty happy with the staff support. So scrolling down. Generally you seem pretty happy with the staff support. I'm so glad. I really want to give a huge shout out to Vanessa for her extremely competent management and support of this.
I didn't realize you guys were answering the survey too.
like that comment,
Good, Steve.
because however, things there are little to no opportunities for CC members to contribute in a way. So if we could get to do more of the advising piece that Diane mentioned, that would probably take care of that one.
That's probably your three.
Okay, scroll down and ask for ways we can improve our support of the CAC. There was some contradiction here. Some folks wanted more detail. Some people wanted more thorough explanations. I guess those aren't contradiction. Continue to help the CAC members address questions. Be patient with new members, give new members the opportunity to be familiar with the concepts. So there's some tension there between going deep for the folks who are very familiar versus like, making sure that the new folks are able to follow along. It's really kind of hard to do both well. Let's see, opportunities for CAC members to contribute in a meaningful way, providing feedback on program designs before they are finalized would be a nice improvement.
I do like that comment. I think it would be helpful because this organization has grown a lot, even since I've started on this committee, just to understand more about where PCE is making its staff additions and for what strategic reasons. That would be nice to hear.
Oh, on the PC, as PC
Yeah,
grows,
as it
maybe
grows.
right, yeah. And it got to the one above about providing feedback on program designs. I do hope that the working groups are helping to address that question a bit. It is the intention.
But we should keep that in mind when we're thinking about working group
Right,
formation next time around.
yeah. Okay, and then, if you could scroll down a little, Vanessa, fully recognize, oops, scroll back up. I fully recognize that I'm well-informed and active. Oh, okay, yeah, so I agree that the CAC really is an asset to the organization's overall success, so. And I'm sorry that sometimes feels it's like, staff people feel like it's a burden to share information with the CAC, and we'll try to keep communicating to the rest of the organization, the rest of the staff. Okay, moving on to the number 4, on a scale of 1 to 5, how clear and understandable. Actually, let's scroll back up. Anything else on the ways that we can improve, staff can improve our support? Your thoughts on this?
Marks were already pretty good. I mean, it's particularly for you two. I think it makes a difference depending on who's the staff liaison to a work group and that type thing. But I guess we can hear about that more from in the working group reports. If we can keep everybody here that long, how are we doing? Tell me. Okay, Stephen, we heard you.
All right, scrolling down then. In terms of how clear and understandable the presentations for the CAC, I was really glad to see high marks here because it can be really wonky, it can be really complicated. So I'm glad to hear that overall it's been pretty understandable. I've been drilling this down into the staff to try to keep presentations understandable. So I'm glad to see that. And then scrolling down, suggestions for improving. Some folks want more detail, more context. Some questions aren't answered. That's interesting. Okay, we'll do better on that. And then sharing the slides beforehand, so folks can read them through. That's a really good recommendation. We've been working on that, and we will continue to work on that. It really depends on how fast our fellow staff members get them to us. We always ask for them ahead of time, and we will keep working.
I think one comment, which might not be one that people want or staff doesn't want, but we've asked it repeatedly, is if it's not ready, even if it's gonna be different for the meeting, if we can get a draft a couple days before, just so we even know what to be thinking about, it's helpful. I know sometimes they don't wanna have a non-finished thing out in the public. But at the same time,
Reasons we can't. do that.
okay, well, I'm just, it's fine, but that's something we've,
So that chart you had today on the budget for the surplus. That would have been helpful for me. I can't see everything on the board.
Oh,
So I'll just start sitting up there, I guess, but I look at a lot of it here. I have double vision, and some other issues.
So maybe even if it was similar to last times, or exactly like last times, it would have been good just to send it.
Then I can read it on here. I know that's just for me, but that would be very helpful if you could have something out earlier so I can look at it.
and I like having it, because then the easiest way for me when we go back, because I always write notes in Word. But the easiest way for me is to take the agenda packet. And then have whatever's in there be, that's what we did at that meeting, and that was the slide, so that's always helpful to me.
right, and that's a good reminder to me also to read off, read some of the content on the slide, not to say, here's the slide, because how do you want?
Thank you.
Yeah, good point. If I were sitting where you were, Robert, I wouldn't have been able to read it either.
I'll start sitting.
Okay, great, scrolling down. Oh, and then thank you so much for sharing messages with the community. It's great to, that's one of the things you're tasked to do, and it's good to see that you all are doing it. So thank you. And then we got information about how you're sharing the information.
Nobody uses Twitter.
Yeah, poor Twitter. But yeah, mostly through word of mouth, email, announcements at meetings, and then some social media as well.
I think we all need to be given T-shirts that say, Peninsula Clean Energy is saving you money, ask me how.
Ooh, that's fun.
And then when we go to the grocery store, we'll be having more conversation.
Okay. Yeah, then there's some good ideas here of how we can make information sharing easier. See the cheat sheet, we can provide that again on the acronyms. But on the PCE programs, oh yeah, because we do have a cheat sheet on that, so we can get that all to you.
Yeah, that would be good too, just because it's changing a lot. I mean, they sunset and then something new starts, and there's always a lot. And Vanessa's good about telling us like little bits and pieces, but it would be nice just to have that, before I go to the grocery store, I'll have the list and I look at it, post it in my car.
Nice. Yeah, good. And I'm so glad to hear you want to table at more public events, because Earth Day is coming. And so glad you're enthusiastic to sign up to help us at all our events this coming year. We will hold you to that. So sign around the sign up sheets, send them around in the next couple of months. Remember that you're enthusiastic. FAWs, we think that's FAQs.
Somebody did say, I think we should honor this. It says, let's have a CAC agenda item on this topic about ways to better share information. So let's get that on, an upcoming agenda. I'm going to talk about those T-shirts again.
All right, down here. The feedback you heard from the community, this was a great list, and I think I mentioned earlier that we have a firm helping us with some rebranding strategy. We sent them this list, so they have a sense of customers are saying, because this is also what we hear. I think you all summarized it pretty well here. There's a select few people who know us and love us, and there's a lot of people who are confused.
Shell games, smoke and mirrors, no free lunch. A lot of cynics out there.
Yeah, and with reason, because there's the energy sector is confusing, and a lot of people feel like it's exploitative, and some parts of it are exploitative. So it's hard to differentiate ourselves from that. Okay, great. Any other final thoughts or comments on this topic?
I vote for Cheryl's t-shirt idea.
You know, that's really fun. I'll bring it up.
I wear mine proudly. I have really good conversations when I go to other organizations. You know, something has to do with my church or a book club or whatever, and I just, and everybody, if you know me, you know about PCE.
What did you think the church should say again? I'm gonna write that.
Oh, oh, PCE is saving you money. Ask me how. Or something else, you know, PCE is really working to make the planet cleaner. Ask me how, or, you know, just a bunch of different things.
That could be a fun shirt to give everybody who's doing tabor.
Yeah, yeah. Every member of this committee.
Very fun idea. Very fun. Okay, all right. Well, thank you again, everyone, for your feedback.
Okay, oh, let's get going.
Public comment, public comment.
Is there public comment on the results of the survey? Do we have any? I don't see any.
No.
Okay, they've all gone to sleep. All right, next is working group reports. Does anyone would anyone like to give a working group report?
Yes.
Jason?
I've got two. I'm doing Michael's. He asked me to report that for the solar plus storage research group that Kathleen was gratefully praising or appropriately before. We're going to meet again on the 31st to finalize something for Peter and then be presenting that in the February CAC meeting with the hopes that that will help actually come up with the plan for how to do that going forward for the group. So I think that's what Kathleen was speaking to earlier. That group has already put together a huge list of what other similar or dissimilar groups like ours are doing across the country. And as Kathleen pointed out, a lot of it, none of us knew about, including the staff that's working on it. So I think that'll be very fruitful. The two other things related to all of this are, because we lost the two members, there are openings. We shouldn't do it tonight, but think about joining working groups if you want to join some of them. The building electrification one has 2 new spots, and then the other one that I guess I'm going to speak to all 3 of these because the other one's what I'm the chair of. What are we called? The demand response. What is the EV charging demand response group? Managed charge.
Yes.
Thank you. That group is meeting every 3 weeks. We're going to meet at the end of this month to help fill up with what he's going to do to present. And I do feel like we haven't done very much. We just kind of respond to what he's given us, but I think we're very helpful to him because we're helping him shape the message as they discover what they've discovered. And it's very fascinating. Even if the answer isn't like, here's how you fix the problem, there's a lot of data they did. I think it's a great study. And we'll probably share that next meeting. And then on building electrification, we're going to meet in February and hopefully take up some of the things that Robert brought up at the beginning, in addition to what we normally do, which is evaluate and look at reach codes and then start pushing things into the new year. But that group needs a new chair. I'm the interim chair. We lost the head of that. So if somebody wants to join that or run that, we'll talk about it at the next meeting. But yeah, so those are those 3 for now, unless anybody wants to add anything.
Do you want to say anything? Yes. Okay.
We have to meet. Our group had to meet. Yes.
Yes, thank you. I was gonna bring that up. Because I need help.
Okay.
And for a little while, like things were a little bit slow, but now I genuinely need help on language access policy. So to like tease the equity group a little bit, if I need help researching other organizations' language access policies and then reviewing our draft language access policy. So let's set a date for that. But meanwhile, if you have any extra time to look at like Google language access policies, you know, public agency, and gather some ones you think are good, that would be super helpful for me. And then let's meet and go over our draft. So by language access policy, I mean like, you know, what languages do we translate our materials in? Which materials do we translate? You know, do we, it's also actually language and technology access policy, like, you know, what alternative pathways to the internet do we offer? Like, you know, can you make a phone call to like program as opposed to filling out something online? So like, you know, how do we make sure that our website is visually accessible to people who are, is accessible to people who are blind, for example, people who are using screen readers? So there's a number of elements to that. Yes, let's schedule a date for that.
Vanessa, will you make note of that in the minutes so that we can make sure we come back to it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, any other working group reports, or any public comments on working group reports? We haven't had any public participation tonight. All right, let's see, marketing community liaison update.
Sure, I'll start us off with an announcement on some changes we've made to our used EV program. And so you'll remember that this is a program that provides a rebate for the purchase of a used electric vehicle or plug-in hybrid vehicle. And the short summary is that we've updated it to make it easier for our customers to take advantage of new incentives from the federal government. And so I'll send out some details to you by email, but I guess the important things to remember is that now we're only providing rebates to people who qualify based on their income. So that'll be $2,000 from us. And our income thresholds have changed so that they're more generous. And for most people, it'll be easier to qualify based on your income. And that if you combine our rebate with the other incentives from the federal government and from PG&E, you could get potentially up to $10,000 off.
A used EV.
Mhm.
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah, so I'll send you all some more information there. But the short answer is that we've made it easier for customers to benefit.
And you'll send that via email and social media, so we could share it both ways.
Yeah,
You'll share with us something to share via both media. Okay, okay.
And
good.
social media, you can always look at our social media and just share directly from our page.
Right, right.
That's the
Yes.
easiest way to do it.
Yes, yes, okay.
Yep, and then we are hiring for a member of our team, a community outreach specialist. So if you all know people who are knowledgeable about the community, passionate about communication, then please share that job description with them.
And to speak Spanish.
And yes, we're looking for a bilingual.
Is that on the site already? Okay.
And then I'll hand it off to you to talk about rates.
Yes, so this is pretty exciting. As you all know, PG&E has raised their rates significantly. As of January 1st, usually Peninsula Clean Energy adjusts our rates to maintain a 5% discount to PG&E. So normally we would have raised our rates as well. We are not raising our rates through at least March. So that means in San Mateo County, in the average residential discount right now is actually between 10 to 12% on generation rates. And in Los Banos, it's actually higher because they have different PCIA. And so, and our board is going to be considering some options for taking a different approach to rate adjustments in the future, because we don't really need that extra revenue right now that we would get from raising the rates. So we'll know more about, where we're going to go with this later on. But yeah, that's the quick update there. Is that rates we're not raising them at least through March.
Are we telling anybody that?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Such
good news.
I know it is. The plan is to see what the board does at the end of January, and then to do, when we have more certainty about that, put out a press release.
Because obviously the headline, the only headline you see is average home 22%, 28% increase.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing they're gonna see,
Right.
unless
Yeah.
we say.
Yeah, we'll have I think we don't want to have like one message now, then another message.
Understood.
Because, one of the proposals is, don't raise rates in June. So that's a better message than don't raise rates through March. So yeah, we're.
But even the fact that you're doing it now, until March is a big, great thing.
It is.
I mean, I'm excited about it.
It is. So something that we can talk about kind of informally, publicly. We're just not putting it in writing until we have the walls. Yeah, that's a fun update.
Make sure I'm clear on this. So the PG&E portion of the bill will still go up.
Yes.
The other part of the bill that will not.
Great point. So yes,
Their transmission piece is gonna go up, but their generation piece is not, because that's
all-
from.
that's all.
correct, correct. So yes, all kind of PG&E customers will see the transmission distribution parts go up. Peninsula Clean Energy customers will not see your generation rates go up. Well, if you don't have Peninsula Clean Energy, if you've opted out, then you will see that. go up.
So it's a big decision.
Yeah.
If you opted, you opted out, so.
Mhm,
Double
yeah.
screwed.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the slogan. Technical term.
Okay, good. That's it in terms of our updates.
Any comments, public comments on the updates? Nope, I don't
No
think so.
public
All
comments.
right. Let's see, next topic is upcoming topics for discussion. Which is Kirsten.
Yes. So the programs team would like to bring back in in February a agenda item on the whole home turnkey building electrification program. Yes, I know you're
Yes.
super excited about this,
We want
so
that.
so no one gets sick, you know. Y'all come back and do that in February. And to Robert, going back to your item about reach codes, we could, while we have the same folks here, we could also talk about reach codes.
Yeah, just real quickly, this is in regards to the Circuit Court's decision not to reconsider the overturning the ban.
Yes.
The ban in Berkeley stays. Technically, they wanted what's called en banc, the whole court to consider, they turned that down. That has an implication for reach codes
Yes.
that I would like to discuss, and we don't need to get into it here.
Yes.
Talk about the decision, talk about what it means, move forward, what we're doing about it, all that good stuff.
Yes, very good. I can tease that a little bit. We are recommending cities take an alternative legal approach that achieves the same thing, but through a more legally defensible mechanism.
I read that alternative, I don't understand it.
Okay.
So if you could send us something that was somewhere where we understand it before the meeting, where we don't have to
Okay.
hear me asking lots of questions. It would help. I did read it, it's online, it's publicly online,
All right.
the alternative ordinance.
Yeah, and if you have specific questions, that might help us get you the information you want.
Well, I can't give it to you now, but it's all right to give it to you online.
Yeah, send us an email, because it sounds like you've read some information online about it, and you've got, well, it sounds like you've read some information
I
about
read the
that.
ordinance
Oh, the alternative ordinance, the model codes we got out?
online.
Great, okay, send me an email with your questions. Because you're kind of having worked in that industry, you're kind of a unique position to have a lot of good detailed questions, so it'll be useful. Yes, and yeah, Diane as well. So yes, we can definitely put that on the agenda for February, since we'll have the right people here anyway.
Be a busy meeting to talk about the direct install and talk about.
Yeah. Other good items that we could talk about, the executive committee has asked me, or Peninsula Clean Energy's executive committee has asked me to come speak about our CAC recruitment strategy in February. And so I've suggested that, last year we had such a deep bench of people who applied, and unfortunately we had to tune down. I'm considering whether we should do another big public round this year or just go back to the people who applied last year. And so we'll be talking about that, and we could, since that'll be in February, right after this group meets, we could put that on the agenda for this group as well. And we'll have more to say about rate updates and filling out working groups. So there's a fair number of good topics we could talk about next month. And the big items going to the board are going to be in February is going to be the whole home turnkey building electrification program. So we'll come here first in February.
And I think it'll be a working group report, but we may want to formalize as an agenda item, the solar plus storage summaries that working group has come up with.
For
that we mentioned
February?
Earlier, the Peters group that we mentioned earlier for February.
Sure.
So I think I left early, Kathleen. Do you remember you guys said to do it for February, right?
Yes, we're gonna meet, you missed this, we're gonna meet,
January
with the
31st,
group
yeah.
in about 3 weeks, and then the idea is to have something to
Okay.
present at the CAC meeting.
Oh, okay, it's gonna be a big meeting. Okay, well, that's exciting. I have a working group presentation. So y'all are done already?
No.
No,
Okay, all right, this is interim presentation. Interim presentation from, what was the name of your group again?
Solar plus
Solar
storage.
plus storage.
Solar plus
I don't know if that's what it's called, but that's what it is.
storage. Right, yeah, that's what. Fabulous.
I think it's called DER Strategy Group or something like that.
Okay, thank you, yeah. Yes, very good. Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Anybody else have any other topics you want to throw out for upcoming agendas, not just February, but March or April or whatever?
You'd had on here the rate updates. Is that something you want on the agenda?
I think yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, we will just move on. Do I need to ask for public comment on that too?
Yeah.
There's nobody here.
Any public comment about upcoming agenda items? No, all right. Lastly, on the agenda is committee members' reports. Does anyone have anything they would personally like to share with the group? Robert, yes.
On Tuesday night, the city of San Mateo will be considering the results of the survey they just took of city residents and businesses on electrification. It's called the equity study, but it's more than that. They hired the Rincon consultants from same ones that did the study at Berkeley. And it's the first step of the process to electrify all homes in San Mateo.
Wow. And that was just to be filled out by San Mateo city residents.
If you work there, pass through there,
Okay,
lived there, I think the city will be okay on that. As of the other day, they had more than 200 responses.
Can you share that with us next time? Because I just did the Redwood City survey and there was like 2 questions out of 100 on that. Yours is all that? That's the whole survey was about electrification?
20 questions on income, house type,
Okay.
what kind of gas, what kind of furniture you have now, all that kind of stuff. So they can start to segment the buildings into different types.
Yeah.
So have standardization when they do the electrification.
I'd love to see that result or whatever when if you bring it next time, because
You
Redwood
wanted
City
to see the
Reach Codes,
survey?
I didn't like the survey. The survey was not helpful that we did 3 years ago.
I can say this, I'm gonna say it on Tuesday night. I was not happy with the San Mateo survey because it said equity. It really wasn't. It was a bunch of other stuff.
Okay.
That's okay. We will work that out. You want a copy of the survey?
Sure.
I can get you a copy from Andrew. I'm sure she'll give it to you.
all right.
Or just the link. Yeah,
I'll
we'll
let
figure it
you-
out. Yeah, sorry. I gotta-
Sorry.
Then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for patience and for going through the long learning presentation. That was really useful.
Is it my call?
Thank you, everyone.
You-
Good night.
Thank you.
So Michael,